everybody, what's up? It's Ryan. Welcome back to Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is the author of Begin With We, Kyle McDowell. Kyle, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
I am wonderful, Ryan. It's great to see you both. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just based off of our pre-conversation to this conversation, I'm excited.
Yeah, likewise.
So cool. So let's just, I guess, start at the beginning, Kyle. Let's talk a little bit about sort of who you are, what you do, and why we're talking.
Yeah, you bet. So I like to start with kind of the first chapter of my career, because I think it's ultimately is what brought us together. So I'm a corporate America veteran of nearly 30 years. And I, like so many of us, started in the workforce with a lot of optimism and wanted to find a path to help make a difference and do big things and maybe make a little bit of money in the process. And, you know, by most standards, I was a pretty successful guy in that world. And before I exited back in 2019, I was leading tens of thousands of employees at pretty big companies. My last two roles, for example, I led 30,000 people around the globe. But what I noticed throughout my career was, with each passing year, and as I took on more and more responsibility and had kind of a greater sphere of influence, my level of apathy increased as well, which is really a kind of a mind-numbing thing to have. Like, the environments you're creating, you start to loathe them, which is, it's just a hard pill to swallow. So
yeah,
I got to this point where the toxicity and dysfunction that I was seeing inside of the corporate world was so strong that I just needed to make a change. And I left the workforce. Turned out to only be for a couple of weeks. I planned on being away for a few months, and I took a role that was largely, it was obvious there was a need for a cultural transformation. And I just knew if I wanted to break away from that apathy I was feeling, and if I wanted to have an impact and also, do some things that I was unable to do historically in my career, and namely connect with people. Because, man, after 20-ish years, I looked around at those that I thought I had really strong, respecting relationships with, and turned out almost all of them, they feared me. They didn't respect me. They just feared me because I was their boss. And I didn't feel good about that. So when I took this role, when I jumped back into the fray, it was leading about 15,000 people, 11 locations, really purpose-driven work. It was processing enrollments for the Affordable Care Act and 1-800-MEDICARE. It was a $7 billion program. But I knew if I wanted to feel the same way, just do the same thing, no problem. But if you want to have an impact and make a difference, the night before I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of this newly inherited organization, I created these principles. And I didn't even call them principles at the time. They were kind of like the 10 rules for us. Each of the principles begins with the word we. Because I just really felt if I entered this work with this team to say, hey, here's what I'm here to do. Look at my resume. I can take us to the promised land. You are what I am what you need. I just felt like that was going to fall on deaf ears and sound hollow. So I knew I needed their help for me to be successful. And I felt as if the opposite were also true. And, fast forward, where are we, 5-6 years later, those principles were the foundation of my USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. It is the backbone of everything I do today. And that's traveling the country, working with leaders to get out of their own way and create environments that allow not only them to be their best, but their teams to be their best and feel as if they're part of something bigger than themselves, and find some reward, lose that apathy that I think so many of us find throughout our career.
As someone who's been in a couple toxic work environments, I really appreciate that thought and that sentiment of we, because I've definitely had the boss that's like in his silo and we can't even talk to him and he won't even say hi to you in the hallway. And I actually quit a job because of that. And it was a job that I loved, and I would probably still be there, still be doing it. And I'm not going to name names or even go down there,
Sure.
But it was directly to that one guy that was my boss's boss. And he just would never even say hello, would never even, like, he was the top dog, and he wanted to be that guy.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. He wanted you to fear him. And it just, that kind of vibe just kills the environment. Everyone else we were great. We got along awesome, but the top dude, yep, they got to have that firewall in between, and it just is not fun.
What a shame. And if I'm being honest, guys, that is how I led the first 20-ish years. was command and control, had to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm the best with the best ideas, which is clearly all not true. And it was when I made that pivot to this we paradigm, this we orientation, and not just like in spirit or kind of happy go lucky words on a wall. Like I'll enter nearly every conversation, especially difficult ones, with like, "Hey, we challenge each other, right?" Or "We do the right thing, so this is where we're going to take this conversation." It's part of my it's part of my ongoing dialect now, because it's shaped who I am, not only professionally but also behind the scenes as a normal dude outside of the workplace.
Yeah. Love it.
No, I love that. Well, in fact, I mean, I'm even inspired a little bit by your story. I mean, there's some parallels with sort of the life I've led, actually. And in fact, it was me doing Medicare marketing that was a big part of me moving or changing some of my opinions. I had the opportunity to visit Spain, and I won't bore everybody with this because I've told the story on the show a million times and written articles about it and all this stuff. But I had the opportunity to visit Spain, and one of the big takeaways for me was the value they put on people. And in the time before that, I was kind of running around like you. It sounds like, kind of, I don't know, I was the American business guy, right? Like I was hustling around. I was trying to make money. It was like whatever it takes, get top dollar, make that cash. And I got over there, and I remember the first time I went to Spain, I was wearing a nice watch. I had my fancy Louis Vuitton wallet. I had my cool shoes. I had all this stuff. And I'd never met a group of people who could have cared less.
How about that?
But I was immediately embraced by, it was our friends, her family, her everybody.
Okay.
And immediately pulled into their lives, even though I spoke no Spanish at the time. I had, very little to do with these people, but they still brought me in as if I was a family member of their own. And for me, that was wildly impactful because I guess for me, what it was a paradigm shift to understand there's another way of living, right? Like in my head, I was like heads down doing my thing. And then on the other side of the world, they just don't prioritize that at all. They don't care about, what I thought was the world,
Yeah.
So for me, that changed everything. And we came back and it's funny because even in our company, we always talk in the we tense too, we call it. And so everything is we, and everything is, and admittedly, when I first started with the we, it was, to try and make us look a little bigger than we were.
Sure.
So, but as we grew into this, and basically my focus started shifting to sort of interpersonal relationships and building relationships with people. It changed everything. Our agency is now what we call a relationship management agency. And it's all, all these things where it's really become a big part of our day. And, so listening to you talk is really, I don't know, resonating with me because it's the same thing.
Thank you, man.
I basically wanted to shift our agency out of doing traditional advertising and traditional marketing, basically trying to convince people to buy products into a realm where, we build relationships by way of product advertising and things like that. So it's a little more, in my opinion, it's a more ethical approach to advertising and marketing. And I found years ago, because we worked in Medicare marketing for 10 or 12 years, and we'll still touch it on occasion. And luckily that industry's evolved some too. But back in the olden days, it was a little bit, grabby and a little bit tricky and a little bit, how do we, talk people into doing stuff?
It was slippery. Back in the day, it was slippery, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
It could have been.
Now I feel like it's come some distance from there. And the work we do now, I feel much better about, but it's been a transition. But yeah, hearing you talk, man, I'm just like, oh, this is perfect.
But isn't it cool though? You said something that I just spilled a little bit of water. You said something that got my attention. This was an epiphany for me. I was so driven to deliver great results, and I was a product of what I observed, and that was command and control. Banging the fist on the desk type stuff, raising your voice, because back in those days, you did raise your voice when you thought they needed to hear that. The transition, the epiphany for me was the results you can deliver when you focus more on the person and the people and the team, and like you said, the interpersonal relationships. The results, like you don't really in some environments, I don't even talk about the objectives of the results because we have such a tight relationship. I know where you're going. I know what you're doing. You know what I'm here to do in terms of support for you. And it's one of the biggest challenges I have today in my speaking and coaching business is getting people to understand and just believe me that letting go of that command and control is the first step to real excellence. It really is. The more you let go, the more good things will happen. And it's kind of counterintuitive for some, and it was for me. But man, the results just kind of come naturally after that.
So you mentioned that you've managed teams of 15 to 30,000 people. And I know that that's not feasibly possible for one person. So there's evidently some
Amen.
sort of structure to that.
Amen.
So there is a we element there. How do you make that we element scale to that many people?
It starts one person at a time. And I'm not, so in that organization where I created the 10 We's, by the way, I should note many, many years later, it's still the cultural manifesto there. Their performance appraisals. I mean, everything they do revolves around we. So it's stuck, and it's stuck at a handful of other organizations. Well, more than that at this point. But for me, it starts, I say every day, every interaction. And what do I mean by that? It's when I evangelize these principles and say, this is who we are, this is what I want us to be known for, both personally and professionally. It's almost like our brand, if you will. From that moment forward, if you're on this team, you're subscribed to these principles and you have to live them, and you have to every single day carry them out in a way that you would be proud to see someone else carry them out. It's not easy. And I talk about this a lot on stage. Like, these principles, they're not, I don't think anyone would disagree with any of them. They're not inflammatory. They're not controversial. They're simple. But as you guys know, simple's not easy. It's hard, especially when you're in a position of authority. If someone is questioning that authority, sometimes our natural reaction is to be like, well, I'm the boss because I said so. And that's a dead end recipe. But it's natural to react that way if you've always led that way. The challenge for me was, so one of the principles is we challenge each other. And the following principle is we embrace challenge. So, very, very specific kind of, to address the question is, once I introduced the principles, I knew that from that day forward, I was being judged. Am I living these principles, or is it just a leadership gap where I expect something out of others, but I'm not going to live myself? So the first moment I got challenged by anyone on the team, I knew I was being watched. And my principles, our principles at that point, they're going to be dead on arrival if I'm behaving any way in conflict with them. I'm a hypocrite at that point. So my approach, and by the way, I should add, I'm not naive. You're never going to get 100% of a workforce of a team, especially a team that size, to be on board. You're just not. So my goal was always to get 2/3 to 3/4 to say, yeah, this is who we are. I'm with this. But making sure that the team that I led directly, my 6 or 7 direct reports, they must be on board. They must be evangelizing the same principles, calling people out when they're not living them, and be prepared to be called out when themselves are not living it. So the point is once I start at that closer level where I can observe it myself, I can't just trust that it's going to happen, because I know they're going to deliver the same message to their teams, and so on and so on and so on. And then just lots of feedback mechanisms. So focus groups, town halls, and being open to hearing the negative feedback when it comes, not just like taking the data and putting it aside and doing nothing with it. So to me, it just starts with every person, every interaction.
Yeah. I love that.
So, with that, we obviously don't have your book, so we haven't read it. We don't know what the rest of the principles are. Are these principles, do they relate in every field? Do they work in every scenario? Or do you have to kind of form your own principles based on your industry?
No, they are agnostic. And as a matter of fact, man, one of the more humbling byproducts of this whole journey that I'm on. So my book came out in 2022. It's just had its 2-year anniversary. Guys, when I started to write the book, I told my wife, if I sell 1,000 copies, I'll be over the moon. We just passed 16,000 units sold.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's crazy, man. It's really humbling.
Congrats.
But thank you for that. But the unintended byproduct that we've seen that's just really cool is the impact that it's having on people's personal lives. I gave a speech at Audi, it's been a few months now. And at the end of the speech, there's this guy that in the back stands up, big old dude, big, like Mr. Clean looking, former Division I football player, big guy. And I said, oh boy, where's this going? And he said, you know what, if you guys listen to this speech and you read this book and you let it will change how you view your relationships. It will change, for me, it's changed how I'm raising my children. And I don't think there's any better testimony that this is not specific to any industry. It's specific to humans. And I think that's where, back to your point earlier, is a lot of this stuff gets lost when you step inside the workplace, like the guy that you used to report to, man. It's like he lost that bit of humanity. He probably would never act that way outside of work, but he can inside because he has some kind of authority. So these principles, they're agnostic. They're good for any industry, even outside of work. And I find myself holding myself accountable to them, especially, not just only, but especially outside of work.
Well, and it's funny. So like Mike mentioned, we don't have a copy of the book in our hand, but I pulled up your list and just kind of reading through some, and I'll just give kind of a high level view here. You know, we own our mistakes, we take action, we pick each other up. You know, a lot of these are things that like, you know, and I can just speak from raising my own kids, you know, a lot of these things, you know, personal accountability, taking responsibility for the things we do, you know, being proactive and not standing around waiting for things to happen to you. You know, all these kinds of things. I mean, we're doing that kind of just naturally. And so to your point about this being kind of a human thing, you know, I think, you know, not only is it just human, but I think it really just draws attention to the things that some of us are doing already, and then finding now maybe a new application in the workforce. So I think that that's really a beautiful thing, actually. And it's pretty cool because I think it makes the lift easier. You know, a lot of these, you know, executive coaches and things like that have their programs and things like that you have to buy into. But I think if you look at this, it's very, what's the word? Maybe like it's attainable, or it's like easily grasped because, you know, I kind of do some of this, you know, and I think any executive who's tried to, you know, run a company or grow a business or whatever has probably done a lot of these steps on their own. And maybe they're having trouble articulating it to their team, or maybe, you know, they haven't really put it in stone as a principle, so to speak, but like they know it in the back of their heads. So I think drawing attention to it in this way, where people can actually look at these things on paper and then draw focus to them, I think, you know, will make a big change for people.
You nailed it, Ryan. That's exactly it. So what I found throughout my, I've worked for a handful of companies throughout my entire career, and it occurs to me that almost all companies do a fairly good, if not above average, a great job onboarding employees, giving them the policies and procedures for how to do their job, like the nuts and bolts, the blocking and tackling. How do you do your job? But what they don't do, and this is where I felt like there was a gap and I needed to close that gap, is that there's not a lot of black and white. Here are the expectations for how you treat other members of our team. Here are the black and white expectations of how we approach what we do, both internally, behind the curtains, and those we serve externally. And I found when you create those guardrails, for lack of a better term, it gives the leader something to lean back on. So for example, Ryan, let's pretend you and I are on the same team and your performance is really struggling all of a sudden. We've noticed that your numbers are down, whatever those numbers are, right? It doesn't matter. And you've been on the team for a little while. So you are aware of the 10 W's. You have quote unquote subscribed to those principles. It makes me coming to you to say, hey, Ryan, listen, man, we challenge each other, right? And I've noticed that so it gives you this kind of like entree, and it allows the person on the other end to say, wait a second, okay, this is not personal. I understand. I'm part of this team. We've subscribed to these principles. It's what we're about. It's who we are. And I need to listen to this because this is something serious, versus walking up and saying, Ryan, your numbers are down. What's up? Right. It's that approach. So it makes it part of the daily vernacular, and it's almost like a currency that people use. And it has the same value, whether you're an intern or the CEO.
Yeah. Well, and it also kind of that approach, hey, what's up? Or, you know, like coming at it that way, hostility, it kind of like instantly puts up a guard to the person you're talking to, and being able to have that kind of initial talking point in a way of approaching it kind of lets the conversation kind of go where it needs to go without the hostility. And it lets you to kind of just talk, which is what most people are losing these days. They don't know how to talk. They don't know how it's like just having a conversation with someone on the bus bench next to you. It just doesn't happen anymore. Everyone's so engulfed in their phones. And that ability to have a conversation and get to the meat of the issue is a critical thing that I think a lot of people just don't have anymore.
Well, yeah. And like you alluded to, I mean, the point where you've got sort of, I guess, this infrastructure to lean back on, right? So it sort of does remove that personal attack. You know, we've got this set of rules and you subscribe to this set of rules. So it's me holding you accountable to this agnostic set of rules over here. It's not me coming at you personally. And I think the beauty of this style of approach also is that because we have sort of an agreed to upon set of rules, or this infrastructure that we work against, or this scaffolding, it makes it easier for me, I guess, to own my mistake or look at it
That's right.
and do it in more of an introspective way, right? Like I
That's
can look
right.
at myself and go, oh yeah, okay, so against the scaffolding, I'm not, hitting XYZ metric, or I'm not doing whatever. But it's not that Kyle's upset with me. It's that I'm not hitting, the scaffolding. I'm not at the rung of the ladder I'm supposed to be at. And that's on me.
You
And I
nailed it.
think to Mike's point about conversation, I mean, I think so many people are so introverted and so busy looking at themselves all the time that to have opportunities like this to break out and kind of look at themselves from the outside, I think can really help people grow professionally.
Well, man, Ryan, perfectly said. Absolutely perfectly said. And Mike, your example earlier of the boss's boss that was like too busy, too important to even say hello, walking down the hallway. It's ironic you use that example, because for the principle, we lead by example. I use that exact example when I'm on stage. It's like when I'm walking through the hallway and I see a team member walking towards me and I don't say hello, or I got my face buried in my phone, I have now sent the message, I'm more important than you. There's this gap between us. And I've also given you permission to not say hello to the next person that walks towards you. So we are constantly under a microscope, leaders are. And the more that we can humanize the position that we're in and get rid of this ego, show a little bit of vulnerability and say, I'm a member of this team. And this is the ground rules for who we are and how we behave within this team. I love the way you frame it, Ryan, with infrastructure. That's exactly what this is. And that's how it works when you choose to, you have to choose, but when you choose to live this way and lead this way and lead your team this way, it turns into just that, the backbone.
Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what I love about this particular which this is number 2 in your list. We lead by example. But what I like about it, or what it makes me think of, is I have sort of this management principle that I think is normally saved for social situations, which is that you're sort of the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
So
like
true.
A lot of us have heard that. In an article I wrote, I kind of flipped that on its head, and I was like, be worthy of being one of, be the one that's worthy of being on the list, right? So you should be the one that's working hard enough to be included in somebody's top 5.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And
That's
so it's just a little bit of a flip on that, but it goes back to this notion of leading by example, right? I mean, if you put yourself in a situation where maybe you are practicing a principle like that, where I'm working really hard to be good enough to be in your top 5, then, it almost forces you to lead by example, right? I mean, this is the way that I'm behaving because I want to be inspiring to you. I want you to do, I want you to look up to me or see me in a way that I'm worthy of inclusion on your list. You know what I mean? And so, so that particular point resonates with me. I like that.
Ryan, I've been on stage and kind of shouting these principles for since 2017 now, and I've never framed we number 2 the way that you just did, and I love it.
Oh, good. Feel free to use it.
Yeah, I'm going to. Thank you for the information. I'm going to, because that's, but I have to be honest, and I would love your guys' reaction or take on this. We've heard that cliche 1,000 times, right? The five people, you show me the 5 people you're closest to, I'll show you, basically. I never really took that to heart until probably the last 2 years of my life. And I wonder if you guys have done the same. I've gotten to the point now where I almost literally, but it is a thought process that goes, if you don't lift me up, if you don't make me better, if you don't challenge me, I'm out, man. I'm out. And I've weeded those friends out of my life pretty aggressively. Have you taken those similar steps to, like, whether either overtly or just kind of subliminally get away from folks like that?
I've done it many times. In the industry that I'm in, you meet a lot of people that aren't going down the right paths. And so you have to befriend them. You have to get to know them, but you don't have to let them in your inner circle. And there's been a few people that kind of broke that barrier, got in the inner circle, and I realized how toxic they were. And you just kind of have to stop replying or just kind of
always be busy when they ask to hang out.
Exactly.
Well, and I would just kind of add to it too, that I think that my take on what Mike's saying, which I think is right, is for me, it's been more maybe a factor of age. Like as you become older and wiser, like when you're young, you're kind of hungry for opportunity. You're looking for ways to expand or grow. And, and I did this a lot, sort of idolizing different people who I thought were strong business leaders or, the guy with all the money. So like, I want to maybe aspire to be like that guy or whatever. And, so I did a lot of that kind of chasing when I'm younger, maybe just by virtue of having a couple kids and stuff. I just don't have time for it anymore. So my time has got more of like a value to it than it used to.
Sure.
So I suspect that that's a piece of it, but
it is for me.
But obviously, just the toxicity and things like Mike's leading to. There are a lot of people who are just posers out there. And I really discovered that, not to sort of generalize everybody in my area, but where I live, I spent a lot of time trying to find new opportunities for our company in the startup community. And what I discovered pretty quickly was that there's very little opportunity for us in that market. There's basically a really tiny window where startups make sense to hire an agency like ours. And, but what I discovered that was probably the bigger insight was that all these people who I thought really had something going on are really just guys walking around with their hands out looking for somebody to finance their ideas. And there's not really a whole lot else to it besides that. Now granted, there's great guys out there too. This isn't, there's not everybody, but it's certainly an insight I've had in this.
Maybe we just hit the wrong community.
30 seconds. What's that?
I was going to say, maybe we just hit the wrong community, but Ryan and I both had a very similar experience with that in the tech world, in that city, in that time frame. Everyone seemed to be kind of acting the role, trying to play the part that other people wanted them to be. And it just, I could smell it a mile away, and every single one of them, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. And I actually kind of like parted ways because it was just getting so toxic in that area, and everyone was just kind of like me, and not caring about the other people like I was trying to do. It was like I'd see someone that needed to, help wiring a bunch of TVs together for a show that they're doing or a project they're working on. I'd go and do it, and there'd be no reciprocation coming back. There'd be no kind of like thank you even. And it's like there's so many like examples of that in my life where it's just been one of those moments where I'm like, okay, that was a learning experience. I'm not going to do that anymore, and just kind of like put that whole community under the rug and walked away. It just wasn't worth my time.
Well, and maybe this dovetails into one of your other we's, which is sort of we measure ourselves by our outcomes, not by activity. Right. Yeah. So in the case of these people that we're using as sort of a generalization to speak to a community of people in this area, a big part of it was there was no outcome. They were just staying really busy. And I think Mike kind of touched on it, which is this sort of this, I don't know if it's an imposter syndrome or maybe the opposite of that, where they're sort of behaving a certain way or trying to live somebody else's life, be as if, even though they actually aren't who they say they are, and they're not actually where they are, And so for young and incorrigible folks like me and Mike, we would be like, oh my God, I want to be where they're at, only to find out that they actually don't, deliver what they say they were going to do.
Yeah. So I wrote that one with the intention of just crushing this notion that my value is determined by how busy I am. So as I mentioned, I've worked for 3 Fortune 10 firms, and I don't mean to imply this is only pervasive inside of bigger organizations, because it certainly exists in smaller ones. But when you're an organization of 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people, it's a lot easier to hide. And I found, and I still see it in my consulting business now, it's like people, I've had very, very high paid, quote unquote, important execs rotate their laptop to me and say, look at this calendar, Kyle, look how busy I am, as if I should be impressed by that. And, I came to the conclusion that I don't care how busy you are, and I don't care from where you work. I don't care how many hours you work. If you work 60 or 6, you have a list of expectations that we've established. If you deliver on those expectations, you're good by me. I like to say I'm happy that my Uber driver puts gas in the car before they pick me up, but that's an activity. I'm not paying for that. I'm paying for them to get me from A to B. And I just feel like, especially in corporate America, if we were to focus more on the outcomes and not celebrate busyness, we'd have a lot more outcomes to celebrate. But we get so enamored with this busyness. And I just tell people, if you can't draw a straight line from the activity in which you're engaged to any number of, or any one of the objectives that you've been assigned, the outcomes that are on your performance appraisal, or even just like a handshake agreement with your boss, how to get this done. If you're participating things that don't further that effort or that outcome, then why are you doing it? It should at least be scrutinized.
Yeah, and I think if you sort of look at some of the more high performing business leaders that people sort of point to here and there, those guys are sort of famous for this, right? Which is that they actually do focus on that stuff, and it's almost maybe a line in the sand between the top brass and, you know, who everybody else is aspiring to be, right? Like this is sort of the key feature of the high performing executive is just holding people accountable to actually delivering something. You know, it's not about the thrash. It's about actually getting done what we're trying to do and whatever that objective is.
Well, look at it this way, guys. In your agency, if you had a deliverable for a client, and just for very good reasons, it didn't get finished. It wasn't, you weren't there. You weren't able to pass it. Do you think they care that you were in 13 meetings the day before? Your client does not care how busy you are. It doesn't impress them either. And ironically, I've been on 2 podcasts in the last month where the host didn't, I think taking exception would be too strong, but they pushed back on that. One guy even said to me, he's like, but Kyle, isn't it like shit happens, right? Yeah, shit happens. And that's when we get in front of the person to whom we owe this deliverable, and we say, hey, man, this has come up, but we don't wait till the day of and say, sorry, or I got an email out, or I've called so-and-so. Like that doesn't fly. It's the real world cares about outcomes.
Well,
and
that's
funny.
what Mike and I just got together yesterday. He was passing through town, so we stopped and had coffee together, and we were talking about something like this, which is, you know, he runs an organization that provides DJs and things for weddings, including himself. And, you know, the prospect that he could just not show up or show up late to a wedding or something, like, could you even imagine? Right. I mean, but for the company who's dropping $500,000 on an ad spend, it's no different. Right. Like, hey, man, we're putting a lot of skin into this game. And you're just like, what? You had too many meetings yesterday, so you didn't get our stuff done? You know, like, I mean, totally not there now. I mean, there's a way to be a professional, which is, oh, hey, man, you know, I'm going to call you 2 days early. Hey, we might be a few hours late delivering or whatever it is, right? There's a way to be a professional here.
Yes.
And they might still be pissed at the end of the day. I mean, you know, people have, I mean, especially as you deal with bigger and bigger organizations, they have more and more moving parts.
Yep.
You know, so, I mean, to get a note from your agency a week before the big rollout that they're not going to be ready on time is like a big deal to a big organization.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, and from running a business like mine, I mean, you know, where we're service based and we have multiple streams and multiple clients who all have multiple needs, and each one of them from their view is the most important person in their sphere.
That's right.
You know, it's like a big part of the job for me really is just juggling stuff around, right? To make sure that we can hit things on time and not, you know, over delivering and under promising, and, you know, making sure that we're hitting those things, because even just a little, hey, this thing, we're just gonna be a day behind on this poster. No big deal. You know, it's just a little job. Those little things are like the little chinks in the armor that are just enough to start shaking a relationship, right? Even if it seems arbitrary, it's a much bigger deal than it seems.
Yeah, so true. And you know what I found, guys, is by and large, I think most teams, most organizations, when they make a commitment to the client, whoever it is they serve, whatever the stakeholder is, it's almost always a given that it's going to be delivered. And things happen and maybe it's delayed or whatever. But what I found is missing is that same level of expectation within the team. And that's why, you know, there's a we that says we say what we're going to do and then we do it, right? You can't promise me something on the team that I need. Like, I didn't just ask for it for fun. Like, I need what you're producing because I'm taking it to this client, or maybe I'm taking it to the board or wherever. So I have found when you set these expectations, especially using principles like the we's, you create this customer service paradigm inside the team. And that's how I approach it with my clients today. It's how I approached it when I wrote these principles. It's like, I don't care about the client. As weird as that sounds, at first, I don't care about the client. If we're high functioning behind the scenes, the client will feel it. Just like if we're dysfunctional, we're toxic, we're not making good on our promises to one another, the client will feel that. So if we start behind the scenes and become really excellent, the odds of us being excellent externally go up exponentially.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I have a personal question, actually, that would relate to me. I actually am in the process of rewriting my resume and a cover letter for a job that is as an executive director for a music venue. And cool. It would be really awesome. It's not rock and roll, more classical, kind of like board of directors, and like a bigger role than, just a bar with a concert stage kind of thing. So it's kind of a little bit out of my element, but I look at the job requirements and I look at everything that 95% of the stuff there I feel I can do. I feel like I've got a handle on a lot of it. It's the accounting and budgeting and money portion of it, where it's like I've never had a role where I've had to have that kind of a budget, that kind of
Sure.
a role. And it seems like they're emphasizing that in this position.
Sure. Yeah.
What would you say to someone in that position where you don't think you might have the chops on that, but there's accountants for a reason? That's kind of, I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking that's where we comes into play.
Yeah.
That's where you rely on your team. But how would you put that out there in a way where you make the hiring team okay with that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's so I've hired probably hundreds, if not thousands of people throughout my career. And rarely does one person check every single box.
Sure.
It's about value, right? So if I'm you, I am over communicating the value I'm going to bring on every other bullet point, every other domain item in that description. Like, I am going to blow you away with these things. And here's the value I can add. But I would also be really transparent with, these are areas that I'm not quite as comfortable with, but my plan would be to roll my sleeves up and meet with so-and-so, the title, the controller or someone in accounting, the CFO, whatever. I'm going to make really overt efforts to connect with that person. I believe in being transparent about your maybe shortcomings is probably too strong a word, but areas that you're not quite as proficient at, being really open about that, because the first time something falls off the rails, they're going to be like, okay, well, he told us this is an area that he's got some development to do, but he's crushing it everywhere else. So I would over-index on the things that you're really good at, the 70% or that 90%, whatever that number is, and be open about your gap in that 10% and your plan to get up to speed to be more valuable in that domain.
Yeah, it's like my books are one thing. I do enough gigs, and enough stuff where I've handled some good amounts of stuff, but not on a board level or with a whole, they're micromanaging this, they're doing that. And it's like that is a little intimidating, to be honest with you. But I feel like I could rise to the occasion. I'm attention, I pay attention to things, and like this, it's like, it's one of those things. I think it's the imposter syndrome coming out. It's like I'm kind of in my own head about it when really I don't need to be. But
Mike,
I guess
here's the truth, dude. Here's the truth. I didn't mean to cut you off, but here's the truth that no one's going to tell you, at least from my experience. I have felt the way that you're describing the feelings you're having now more times than I can count.
Sure. I mean, at that level with 30,000 people below you, like that would be very intimidating.
It is intimidating. I'll give a really quick story. I think that maybe highlights what you're feeling and why you should probably not feel it as strongly as you do.
Yeah.
So before I left corporate America, I worked for a pharmaceutical company where, this is not an exaggeration, I had 17 interviews over 7 months before they hired me. I was very intimidated going into that role. But it turns out everyone else, like the people that I met with, as well as the people that I led, as well as the people I interacted with on a regular basis once I joined the company, they don't have it all figured out either, man. Nobody has it all figured out. And I've led massive organizations, had more quote unquote success than I ever would have imagined. My book is doing things I never would have imagined. And I have imposter syndrome episodes at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. So, I don't know you that well, but I'll tell you, as you approach these interviews or whatever the next several steps are for you, they don't have it figured out either. And when you show that vulnerability of the things that you're not quite as expert as the others, I think there's an endearing quality in there. Nobody's got it figured out, dude. It took me a while to get there, but nobody's got it figured out.
Well, and I would just add to that too. I mean, a big part of hiring decisions actually doesn't even boil down to what you can do. It's sort of the cultural fit, right? Like, are you the right guy for the gig? So when you have the opportunity to interview, finally, that's when they'll decide if they like you or don't like you. I mean, like they're making a decision on who they're going to hire based on who they want to spend time with. I mean,
that's right.
You might be the best engineer out there, but if you're totally abrasive and people don't want to work with you, then it's not going to work out anyway.
That's exactly
the other
right.
thing I would just sort of mention about resumes and stuff in general, having consulted lots of kids trying to go into the kind of work we do, everybody, shoots the moon with these applications, right? I mean, the idea is that we want all this stuff because who doesn't? But the reality is, to Kyle's point and sort of what you were talking about, Mike, I mean, paring it down to the things that you're actually expert at, being honest about the things you're not. I mean, even just that little step is, communicating the point. I'm trustworthy. I'm transparent. I'm honest. I mean, like, you're giving people clues to who you are as a person, just by virtue of being honest, and I think so many young people especially feel this urge to try and, I see this a lot in advertising, which is they'll grab a project that they did once with a bigger agency or something, and they knew the guy that was the creative director on it, so now it's in their portfolio. And it's like, and so there's a lot of those kind of guys in the ad world,
So
or maybe
true.
this was a student project and we got to go, hog wild, and it was Tabasco brand, we're working with the biggest companies, we're doing all this stuff, but it turns out it was just a portfolio piece from school. It's like, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where it's like, well, you're lying without lying, right? I mean, I understand why you're doing it. You're trying to make your portfolio look good. Yeah. But like, you're not going to trick me that you're, doing Ogilvy's work when you're first year out of college. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what happens though, even if you can trick them and you trick them into, you're going to get exposed. Yeah. You're going to get exposed that you're either dishonest or you don't have the level of knowledge or acumen for whatever domain that you're deficient in. It's going to get exposed. If not by those that hired you, by your team, which is even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, I mean, just articulating up front, or I guess demonstrating this ability to be honest and sort of introspective and all those things.
Lots of value.
Like, I mean, you're saying so many things just by being honest about what you can do and what you can't do. Like, I mean, that's just right. In that step alone, you're communicating so much.
Totally.
That,
Mike, I just thought something else, man. And I know you may not want to spend more time on this, but
oh yeah, go.
In the areas that you are a little bit nervous about, I would try to find out who the person is, assuming that there's someone underneath you that would report to you that has kind of the day-to-day responsibility, or maybe it would be you, I'm not sure. But as soon as you can find out the person that's closest to this area that you are a little nervous about, even in the interview process, yeah, man, I would love to meet with so-and-so. It'd be my goal to spend a lot of time with so-and-so to get myself up to speed. There's probably a wealth of knowledge that I can pick up from this fella or this woman, whoever it is, but just expressing your desire to get better in that domain and while acknowledging there's an opportunity.
Well, I have a background in software development, so it's like I can follow a process and make something to a conclusion. And so sure. I feel that the areas that I might be lacking, like in that world, the accounting world, the budgeting world, all that, whatever, I'm sure they have systems in place that they're already using. And as long as I can understand and wrap my head around the systems and figure out that process, I feel like I would be totally fine. It's just a matter of learning. Sky's the limit if you're willing to put the effort in and learn. You just have to put the effort in and learn about it. So
that's right. And I think that's true, guys. And you based on this conversation so far, you would agree. You can do anything you want to do in this world.
Yeah.
I truly believe you can do anything. It may suck to get there. You may fail 1,000 times before you get quote unquote there, but you can do whatever you want to do if you just put your mind to it. I really believe that in this world, especially where we live and the times we live today.
Yeah. Well, and this maybe even goes a little bit back to our conversation about your number 7, about the measuring outcomes.
Yeah.
Is a big part of getting to where you're going is knowing where you're heading.
Amen.
And so, so like, I mean, if what you want to be is, sound engineer for Foo Fighters, like, okay, well, the goal. And like you're saying, you might have to shovel crap for a lot of years before you get there, but at someday you might be able to manage them, or, it'll be a much more geriatric version of them by then. But, maybe one day you'll get an opportunity to run sound for those dudes, or whatever it is, but I think, it just sort of lends back to that idea about measuring outcomes and understanding where you want to head in the first.
Right. I just had an image of Dave Grohl, rocking around in his 90s like the Rolling Stones.
Just go back to the broken leg footage of him sitting in the throne with the cast on. That's what it will look like, I think.
But they did a video, The Sky is a Neighborhood. They did a video for that song where they're all made up to be like super elderly. 70, 80, like 90. Yeah, it's so if you want to see what you would look like managing, or they would look like, go to that video, because they are, although not to be too off topic, but Dave Grohl's got some other things he's dealing with right now. I'm sure that they're not looking for a sound engineer right now.
Now, if you want to be Dave Grohl's attorney, maybe there's an opportunity,
Yes.
So just set your goal is the point here.
Well said.
So I wanted to pivot a little bit and sort of talk about pivots. So I mentioned earlier, that for me, there was a big shift in my life, which was being exposed to another culture showed me that there was a new way of being that resonated with me, and I felt like being that way. You mentioned having sort of a pivot in your career too, where sort of all these things sprung from. And I'm not sure if you really got into what your pivot was or if it was just something that sort of developed over time. But what I want to sort of use that conversation to frame is when you sit down for a consulting relationship with somebody or you're trying to win over consultative business, one of the things that seems like it would be a requirement to find a customer for you is they need to be introspective enough to understand that there's a problem in the first place. And so I wonder if we could first sort of just talk about pivots and recognizing, do we act on this pivot? Is it a whim? Whatever. When do we know it's true? And then once you've, discovered this pivot in yourself, how can you use that to be sort of maybe a little bit more introspective and understand there's a problem in the first place so that you can look up a guy like Kyle?
Yeah, great. Really great question, Ryan. For me, the pivot was not, there was no light switch moment. As I mentioned, I was really apathetic towards the whole corporate world. And I made a promise to myself that if I were to go back in and lead a big organization again, I was going to do it very differently. I didn't know what that looked like, though. I just knew I couldn't stomach the same toxic, bullshit, bureaucratic nightmare that I was living, again, in the environments that I had created. So the pivot was, if you want something different, you're going to have to do something different, man. But I just didn't know exactly what that was. And literally until the night before, I was about 60 days into the role when I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of the whole organization and came up with those principles. So that, for me, it was a build. It was a slow build to, you want something different. Just by definition, you got to do something different. I wanted to be the leader I never had.
And honestly, I imagine that's how it is for most people. I imagine most leaders, it seems like, or at least everybody I know that's worked in sort of corporate gigs over the years, they all kind of get here, it seems like. And back to just sort of the notion of this list of we's being kind of human truths.
Yeah.
It seems like the corporate machine, with some exceptions, obviously people find joy in their work and some people really like what they're doing. But it does seem like a lot of people in sort of executive leadership end up getting to a point like this where, and I don't know if it's age, I don't know, what the factors are that lead to it, but it does seem like there's a layering of life experiences that ultimately sort of culminate in this idea that I don't like how this is going, man. And so I don't think it's like a light switch moment like maybe I had, but I think what you're describing is probably more accurate to what you're. I gotta be honest with
Ryan. That wasn't my experience, though. The more quote unquote senior I became, the more I felt as if I was surrounded by robots.
Yep.
People that just the moment they stepped in the office, they lost their humanity, they lost their empathy. It was more about results than it was about the people delivering the results. Now, please don't mishear me, man. I'm not entirely unicorns and rainbow. And like, if you're not doing your job, you got to go. Right? I'm not. I don't mean to imply that I'm completely soft. My point is the pivot from focusing strictly on results to focusing on the people that deliver the results was something that I observed in maybe 2 or 3 leaders in my career. Maybe. What I observed was the exact opposite, which was also just as educational. If you don't want your team to feel the way you feel right now, Kyle, then don't behave the way that your boss just treated you. So that was very informative to me, or for me. And I will add also, I have a particular company in mind that will remain anonymous, the most toxic place I could ever imagine. And I knew it within the first week that I was there. And if others had come to that pivot point the way that we're describing, I wouldn't have felt that way so early on. It was nonsense. Now, what you framed earlier about, the introspection that my clients should have, it's interesting. You would think that's the case, but I have found in the last 2 years of doing this work, my clients are split into 2 camps. The first is exactly what you described. They are vulnerable and self-reflective and introspective enough to say, we got a problem, or maybe I have a problem. I did work with a small marketing company up in the Panhandle, and the CEO was straight up. He's like, I'm a visionary. I know where I'm taking this company, but I can't lead for shit. I alienate my team. They don't like working with me. I need someone like you to come in and help reshape things. That's an example. The other half, the other 50% of folks that reach out to me, and ultimately, more often than not, I don't do business with them, is they feel like a cultural transformation or leadership development is an initiative, and they're checking the box. sometimes it's even come from their board or the CEO that says, we got to make these changes. Our employee engagement scores suck, or whatever metric they have they're trying to fix. But when I meet with them or get on site with them or spend time with the people that report to them, it's obvious. It's just it's an initiative and a check the box. And I've turned work down when I feel that's the case. And I've also taken that work with the naivete that I can actually make an impact, only to call a month later, 2 months later. And it's like, Kyle, who, we, what? There's just nothing took hold, because if you don't, it's not an initiative. It's not a light switch. If you have to make a commitment to lead this way and be on a team in this way for it to have any type of sustainable success.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I mean, it actually dovetails into exactly what I wanted to kind of finish up with you. Although admittedly, this is probably too big a question to solve in the next 10 minutes, but something we could do. So as you mentioned, some people are just checking boxes, things like that. Other people are looking for, to try and improve themselves or whatever. How do you, I guess, sort of maintain authenticity and transformation? So in a company where you're coming in and you're changing the way they live or the way they do business, especially, if you have a visionary CEO that maybe started the company and has led it throughout, things like that, where basically the culture of the company itself is that person's culture. It's whatever they established, right?
Yeah.
And, obviously, I mean, you sort of touched on what would happen if you try to walk into a place where they're just trying to check a box. I mean, authenticity is probably not even on the radar. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you could sort of talk about, like, how do we, I guess, sort of make transformation happen in a way that's authentic and true to the company, that is sustainable and people can actually work with, and that people actually buy into if they have 10 years of working under some other kind of leadership. Like, how do you actually get people to turn the corner on these things?
My man, at the risk of sounding what's the word I'm looking for? Self-grandiose or self-gratifying? Yeah, something like that. I'm not smart enough for a word like that.
We get the vibe. We're good.
You know where I'm going. Yeah. It is principle-based leadership. Without question. And I'm not here to pat myself on the back to say the 10 W's are the only way. As a matter of fact, I tell folks, just establish your principles. What do you want to be known for? What is your leadership legacy going to be? How do you want outsiders to view the team? What are you known for? Not the big brand, like the capital B brand that we support as part of our company, but my personal brand, my team's brand. And once you establish those principles, you make no bones about it. You're very conspicuous. This is who we are. This is how we operate. When waters are choppy, we're going to lean into these principles. I loved your word, the infrastructure, the backbone. Because what I've found, without that like pulling force, or that true north, for lack of a better expression, and to use a tired cliche, that true north, everyone's left to their own devices. Everyone has their own standard for how we operate. Everyone has their own what's acceptable. And having these principles, whether it's the 10 W's or whatever works for you, you have something to lean back against and say, no. We own our mistakes. And you knew you made that as an example. We own our mistakes. You knew you made a mistake and we found this. You should have come to us. Or we pick each other up. I know you're struggling. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to help you get to your next gig, whatever that is. So when you establish those, lack of a better term again, rules, the guideposts, here's how we behave. You have a playbook and you have the framework, and it's easy to call someone out when they're not participating or living up to those expectations. And it's easy to lean into them in times of rough water. For me, it's just establishing that, because otherwise everyone's left with, I think one of you mentioned, they have their own systems and they have their own, right, these gimmicks. This is not a gimmick. It's not a system. These are the rules by which we will operate every day. And if you can't, that's okay. I'll help you find another job, but you're not going to be on this team.
Yep. Well, Kyle, as I predicted, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, man. Me too.
Thank you.
Genuinely.
Thank you for making time for us. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Can you tell people how they can reach out, get in touch with you, maybe find your book?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for the opportunity. So the book is Begin with We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. And my social media and my website's all the same. It's Kyle McDowell Inc. And I'm on essentially every platform. And I'm glad that you asked that, but I don't share those platforms or that handle for vanity metrics. I genuinely, either me or a member of my team replies to every single message. I want to help. I want to serve. And as cliche as that sounds, it's really true, because I've spent 20 plus years in that command and control place. I'm a very lucky guy. I have an opportunity to help others. And being on a show like yours and this platform is really a beautiful way to help me help others. And I'm very grateful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Kyle. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.